Before we get started, if growing an e-commerce business is your focus, you'll need a platform that's focused on growth. That's where Klaviyo comes in. Klaviyo is the ultimate e-commerce marketing platform for online brands of all kinds and all sizes. Whether you're just getting started or running a well-known brand, it gives you everything you need to send memorable, branded emails, text messages, and more so you can build strong relationships that keep your customers coming back. With flexible automations, powerful insights, and super precise targeting, Klaviyo is a faster way to turn great ideas into great customer experiences. That's why it's trusted by more than 40,000 brands like Living Proof, Huckberry, and 8 Sleep. In fact, on average, Klaviyo customers see a 41% increase in overall revenue within 5 months. Klaviyo scales with you, so you never have to switch. They support everything from garage startups to iconic billion-dollar brands. Want to learn more about how you can grow your brand with Klaviyo? Visit klaviyo.com/grow to get started with a free trial today. That's KLAVIYO.com/grow.
All right, it's another film study. We get to look at that beautiful offensive performance up in New England this weekend. Ken McKusick, how you doing?
Life's good, Josh. How about you?
It's all good down here. Can't complain about anything. We got a return guest today, Clifton Brown from the Ravens and the host of Black in the NFL, which I believe episode 4 just came out yesterday or the day before when I was looking at.
Actually,
right?
Today, Tuesday, it did, yes.
Okay. I knew it popped up on my phone. I looked at, you got Anquan Bolden on there and stuff today. So how's that podcast going? Is that getting received well?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of positive feedback, actually, and I think some definitely discussion that's compelling and definitely interesting. And yes, I think it's going very well. So today's episode, Players and Policing, Anquan Bolden was on along with Mark Ingram, were the 2 Ravens guests. And yeah, I encourage people to tune in and listen and really appreciate the support.
All right. And Ken, as we get into this New England game, has there been another game that you were so happy to watch from home instead of in the stands, like this weather up north?
Yeah, it's awful weather, obviously, but an awful game to watch at all. It had me screaming at the TV set all night, and those injuries were the worst. They really, I can live with the loss. I have a really hard time dealing with the fallout from the injuries and what this may mean for the 2020 Ravens.
All right. I totally. And before we get into that, let me just remind everyone real quick that this show is brought to you by MyBookie. Like the past few weeks, head on over to MyBookie and use the code RAVENS. Looking ahead, the Ravens right now are 4.5-point favorites over on MyBookie. So you can do what you will with that, whether you bet for the Titans or the Ravens. That's where the line is right now. And make sure you use the code RAVENS so they do that dollar-for-dollar match.
All right, so let's move on to the Ravens' current state here, because with 7 weeks to go in this season, they're very much in the wild card hunt here. And the problem is that they have so many significant injuries that are going to have to change the structure of how they play. And we'll start on the offensive side, where Boyle is an enormous part of the offensive playbook. And how will the Ravens move on without him, Cliff?
Well, they'll have to figure it out, but it's certainly going to be more difficult. He's definitely one of the best blocking tight ends in NFL, and as much as the Ravens love to run the football and use combination blocks, he's a big part of that, as well as being, a receiver who's gotten better every year in that department. He was hurt on a play actually catching the football rather than blocking. So, yeah, they're going to miss him. Obviously, more of a burden's going to fall on Mark Andrews at tight end. I definitely feel that the other weapons, whether it be wide receivers, running backs, they're all going to have to step up. And certainly the offensive line, too. I mean, Nick Boyle's like an extra offensive lineman the way he can block. Not having him and then having the injuries that they have on the offensive line already, it is going to be another obstacle that they have to find a way to overcome.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because the Ravens are already, to my way of thinking, playing shorthanded at tight end. They had 3 tight ends on the roster, all 3 pretty good players, but they didn't duplicate in any way what they had last year with Hayden Hurst being that extra wild card they could put on for 13 personnel. A guy who not only probably had the best set of hands on the team, but also was a guy who could get into level 2 and level 3 and have the agility in space to make really good blocks.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this will just be a continuing evolution of not being the same as 2019. I mean, to me, this whole season, particularly around Baltimore, there's been so much comparison to what they did last year. And to me, football, more than any sport, any of the major sports, things can change dramatically from year to year. And whatever the 2020 Ravens are going to ultimately be, is going to be different than 2019. That should be crystal clear by now. So that does not mean the Ravens season is over, that they can't make the playoffs and they can't do something once they get to the playoffs. But they're going to have to do it a different way than they did in 2019. And losing Nick Boyle for the season, then that's just another part of that. I think they are going to have to rely on their passing game a little more. They're going to have to be a little more diversified offensively, and it would definitely help if they could find a way to get a few more big plays at some point this season. They're not going to be the type of team that can methodically, week after week, I don't think, dominate at the line of scrimmage. So they're going to have to find other ways to win.
Yeah, they certainly haven't had any of the really long passes down the field, but I want to get back to something else you mentioned, because the offensive line cohesion was really a hallmark of that 2019 team. And again, I'm in completely agreement with you that you can't, set the standard as 2019. That was a 14-2 team. It was a historic offense with a historic year out of their quarterback. You can't set the bar there, but the cohesion would have been a nice thing to continue, even though it wouldn't have been the same players with the loss of Marshall Yanda. Now it looks like next week it's possible all 5 offensive linemen will be at a different spot if they decide Matt Skura can't continue at center with the snapping problems he had.
Yeah, well, cohesion definitely is important for the offensive line. And that became an impossibility once Ronnie Stanley went down for the year. The Ravens started off, with starting Tyree Phillips, who's also been hurt as a new right guard in place of Yonda, and really felt like they had the makings of a very good offensive line. And then, of course, losing a player like Stanley, Phillips being out now for a while, and then, I definitely can understand the decision to move Orlando Brown from right tackle to left tackle. They're fortunate enough to have a talented player that talented who can do that, but that created another change. And then obviously Matt Skura has had some problems now with snaps in the last couple of weeks. So the offensive line to me is a major key to the Ravens the rest of the way. Maybe the biggest key. They should get Phillips back at some point. Orlando Brown certainly talented enough to handle the left tackle spot. We know that Skura can play better than he has the last couple of weeks. So hopefully he gets back on track. But yes, the cohesion and the play of the offensive line, not only in the running game, protecting Lamar, it's going to be a huge factor as far as how far the Ravens go, how well the offensive line can play from this point moving forward.
Yeah, no doubt about it. On the defensive side of the ball, and we're doing the offensive pod, but we should mention this anyway, they're going to have to face a Tennessee team that obviously relies heavily on a running game, or is very effective doing it, and beat the Ravens with it in the playoff game last year. They need to find some ways, in my opinion, to overcome being small along that DL this next week. I mean, that's a group that the Titans' offensive line is pretty good, but the Ravens' defensive line is pretty bad without Williams or Campbell.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to go worst case scenario and say that neither Calais or Brandon play, then I feel like the Ravens, this could be a week where they do a lot of run blitzing. I think Justin Madubuike has played really well, really all year. And I think Broderick Washington definitely showed some flashes against the Patriots. You'll see a lot of them. Justin Ellis, too, you'll see a lot of him. And then obviously Derek Wolfe. But, the Patriots A lot of reasons they won that game, but obviously one of the big ones was they were able to run the football effectively, stay out of second and long, third and long, and the Ravens weren't able to blitz, do a lot of the things they like to do to put pressures on quarterbacks and create turnovers. They never got to that. So I think this against the Titans, obviously stopping Derrick Henry is the number one priority. You may see a lot of blitzing just designed to stop the run. Patrick Queen, Malik Harrison. Don't know if LJ Ford's going to be back, but you've got Pernell McPhee, Matt Judon, versatile player. I think you're going to see a lot of blitzing, or I would guess, designed to stop the run, get Derrick Henry on the ground before he builds momentum, and get Tennessee into second and long, third and long. Once the Ravens get you in obvious passing situations, they can do some damage. I think that's going to be the goal.
Yeah, obviously, big key there. I think they did do some run blitzing in this last game, by the way. Malik Harrison led the team in blitzes, and Queen did not have any pass blitzes. But the point is made that, a lot of those blitzes that you see from an inside linebacker on a passing down, particularly when they start with play action, very well can be identified as a run blitz. That's a player shooting a gap early to try and get a stop in the hole. And I think the Ravens certainly realized the problem. Late in the game, they had some real sellout jobs. They sent Marcus Peters on a run blitz at one point, and he made a tackle. So totally agree on that point. And I think that's probably where they need to start. I think they'll also activate Aaron Crawford for the game and go with 5 defensive linemen. There really is no other choice anywhere in the area code right now.
Yeah, I mean, injuries are a problem. No one likes to use them as an excuse. You can't really control them. And so, unfortunately, this is obviously a time where the Ravens are dealing with more injuries than at any point in the season. And yes, they're just going to have, if they're going to win, they're going to have to do it with a few different players in a few different ways. So they do have a very deep roster, one of the best in the NFL, or deepest, I should say. That depth right now is being tested, and they're going to need some guys who are filling these roles to step up.
Yeah, big time in terms of that depth being tested. It's been rare in the Ravens' past that I can recall it being tested as much. But if you think back to '07 in terms of what happened to the defensive backfield, there have been other years like that. '05 was equally bad, I would say, in terms of defensive backfield injuries. They certainly had some challenges. Let's move to the offensive line, talk individual scoring. I always set this up, Cliff, with a high-level look at the scoring as I saw it. 64 scored snaps in total, 3 penalties for 25 yards. That's too much. Only 1 sack allowed by the offensive line, only 1 sack in total. They allowed no other quarterback hits. That's very good. Here's what's not good. 9.5 pressures allowed, which was the second worst total of the season. And they came from all over, so as you'll see. A lot of players had individual responsibility for that. I share responsibilities, which is why you get these fractional numbers that'll show up occasionally. They gave Jackson ATS a fair amount of the time, just slightly under 1/3, which is not too bad. That's enough that Jackson can make something happen on those plays. The run blocking included 1.5 penetrations. Those are runs for losses. That's a big improvement, actually, from the Colts game where they had 7 individual runs for loss in that game. So that wasn't good. I'm going to just go right on to Orlando Brown, who is first at left tackle. He had not surrendered a single pressure in 121 snaps at left tackle. He allowed 3.5 in this game. Sorry, make that 3 in this game. I actually made a change right before the show. A third of a sack. He also missed 10 blocks. And one of the things that keeps showing up to me, Cliff, is when they do zone blocking schemes, particularly to the right, Orlando Brown is almost taken out of the play. And there are a couple of reasons for this. Number one is, as the trailing player, it's harder for him to make a block. And that was always the problem with left tackles like McKinney and whatnot. Stanley was able to make more such blocks by getting to level 2 or even level 3, trying to take out a cornerback on a play that's run away from him. Brown has much less foot speed. His best alternative to take out a player is a cut block at the immediate spot. I think he's been instructed by the Ravens not to do that anymore. I know they did it for McKinney at one point. The Ravens would be very smart not to risk the only guy who can play left tackle right now on cut blocks.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that position, even though he loves playing there, to play it at a level that Ronnie Stanley was playing it, is asking, a whole lot. Orlando, I think that they know what they have, and I think that he'll get better as the season progresses. I think he's going to do fine there at that position. But again, Ronnie Stanley, in my opinion, is the best player in the league at that position. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big loss that they're fortunate to have someone as talented Orlando filling. But yes, they are going to have to do a few things differently probably without Ronnie being there.
Yeah, so the first two games, Brown had played extremely well there, A and a B. This game he had a D. 10 missed blocks was a heavy consideration of that, but the 3 pressures were the first he's allowed, the first pass rush events he's allowed since he moved over to left tackle. Bozeman, let's move on to him at left guard. He had 2 pressures, and that was 1 full and 2 half. 1 half of penetration, a third of a sack. He did make 5 out of 5 pulls. He had a decent game going. He would have had a B late, but it was ruined by a late holding call, and that dropped into a D. You saw him kind of looking up at the Jumbotron, wondering about that call. It looked pretty much like a hold to me, even on the broadcast video.
Yeah, I remember that play. And yes, I thought that the flag certainly, was warranted there. And, Bradley, to me, is a guy that, I'm impressed with him as a young player that I think that he is still developing and is already pretty good. He got that job last year. It wasn't guaranteed. Played better as the year went on. I think this year could be more the same. Again, this is a stretch run for this whole offensive line unit. 7 games to play. The Ravens need their offensive line to be steady. They don't have to be spectacular, but they need to be steady. If they're going to be, Bozeman's going to be a big part of that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Bozeman, it's very close whether Bozeman or Brown has been their most consistent offensive lineman since about the middle of last year, so at least since the bye week of last year. Bozeman went into that Seattle game at risk of losing his job and turned in his best performance of his career at that point last year. And then this year he started off very well and has played. There's been some variation, as there is in all offensive linemen, in game-to-game results, but he's generally, I think, played pretty well and is one of the solid players. That's one of the reasons I'm kind of afraid about moving him to center, even though I think he might be the best choice there.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that the best situation for the Ravens would be to leave him where he has played well and where he feels most comfortable. We all know that center carries a lot of responsibility. All positions do. But then, yes, to move him into center would put him in a new position with even more responsibility. So, yeah, he is a left guard who, can handle that position very well. We'll see what happens, though. I mean, the Ravens, at this point, with the injuries, they have to figure out the best 5 going forward. And if it means him moving, so be it. But yes, I do feel it might be better for the Ravens if he can just stay at that left guard position.
All right. Now moving on to a guy who's really taken a big shoulder of the burden for the loss in this game was Skura. Inaccurate snaps obviously were a big problem, and it marred what was strange is he had a very good blocking game. And it was really all about the bad snaps in this game that held him back. But otherwise, boy, he had a great game as a blocker that got forgotten, obviously with some enormous negative plays. And, if you want to really look at the value, the fourth down miss is tremendous high leverage play. But the other plays are really like sacks when they end up there. The other shotgun snaps that are inaccurate messed up the timing of the play, which happened at least once, maybe more than once, obviously a concern as well.
Yeah, I mean, no offense is really built to, convert first downs once you start getting into second and 25s. And, those are just drive killers, those bad snaps. Usually when you see that play happen, the drive's going to end right after that. It's just too much to overcome. And, yeah, I mean, Scurry, this year, he did a heck of a job just even being ready week 1 after that massive knee injury he had last year and to be the starting center. We know he can play better. This has not been an issue for him, these snaps, until the last couple of weeks. So, as Coach Harbaugh said Monday, no one feels worse about it than Skura. He's a tremendously hard worker, very conscientious, very tough. I feel that he'll clean this up, but certainly if it isn't fixed, it's something that you'll have to fix because you cannot succeed if you're going to be once twice a game having those situations where a snap either leads to a turnover or kills drives. It's just too much to overcome.
One of the things we talked about on the show last night briefly, but I want to mention it again tonight because not everybody listens to both, is that pitchers often have injuries which are to their fingers on their pitching hatch, either the index finger or middle finger, which are critical to gripping the ball and releasing it. That is the case with Skura. Apparently has some sort of a cut at the end of his finger. He was using a glove to snap the ball where he usually used the most intricate tape designed fingers I've ever seen on the sidelines. But anyway, he was using a glove last night. I wonder if that's impeding his ability to feel the football the same way and know when he's got the proper amount of juice on it. It's not like shotgun snaps have been ideal from Skura for his entire career. He has had problems with it. I'm not saying they've been, skittering back 20 yards like they did, on Sunday night, but I'm saying that he's had problems directly snapping the ball. In fact, last preseason, Patrick McCary took virtually every 7-on-7 shotgun snap. Part of that preparing him for that, but obviously McCary may be at a point right now where he'd be a better shotgun snapper. Not that they can afford McCary to move to center at this point.
Yeah, well, all eyes are going to be on this situation in practice this week, I'm sure. Matt's going to have to show that these problems are behind him. If not, again, I don't anticipate the Ravens heading into the game Sunday feeling that this is going to be a problem. So if it's Skura out there, then that'll let you know that they feel that this is no longer an issue. If you see somebody else at that spot, then that to me will be indication that they felt like they had to make a change.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it'll be interesting to see. I think the Ravens will certainly keep it under wraps. That's the Harbaugh way in terms of letting people know what they're going to do. But it'll be interesting to see if Skura moves to left guard, if they do that, or if they decide Fluker maybe at guard might be the other alternative they would use. They really need a left guard because they have a right-handed run game. That left guard spot's important because he does most of the pulling for the team. And so whoever goes there needs to be fairly mobile. Skura's been moderately mobile, I'll say, this year, not exceptionally mobile, and certainly not the player he was before the knee injury.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, they're certainly not going to make an announcement of which way they're going to go. They do have options for sure. That's one of the things the Ravens have always tried to do is have offensive linemen who are versatile for situations just like this when you have injuries, where you can move certain players to different spots and still be effective. But, again, this is a big week for the offensive line. To me, the biggest one that I can remember for a while because of the injuries and because of where they are, in the AFC. I mean, they're 6-3, but I believe there's 6 teams in the AFC, I believe, who are 6-3. There's a lot of teams that have a legitimate playoff shot, even though they've expanded, and added an extra team this year. There'll be 7 teams in the conference making it. There's about, at least 9 teams you feel have a real shot to make it. So they have to have their offensive line, play well down the stretch for them to, run off some wins and make sure that they get into the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple guys we haven't talked yet. I mean, Ben Bredesen and Colon Castillo are also sitting on the active roster. They haven't really been in games. Bredesen just a handful of snaps as a 6th offensive lineman. Colon Castillo not at all. It'd be interesting to see if either one of them might be the choice at center if for some reason Skura couldn't go. But let's go on to the rest of the offensive line. By the way, if you see the grades and you're wondering why this happened, Skura has an A- grade for me for this game. It's completely as a blocker. The way that I do adjustment, I never have a negative adjustment for anybody. It's always how much above the replacement level was their opponent and some other factors to give a positive adjustment. If I were to give a negative adjustment, I probably would drop him by about 20 points in this game for those plays because those were very significant negative events. But he gets an A-. If anybody's wondering why that happened, the snap counts or the bad snaps don't really count against him by as much as they should. Let's move on to Patrick McCary. Played his best game as a pro here, no doubt about it in my mind. Near perfect grade at right guard. Got a .99 adjusted on my basis, so he only missed one block. And he had a B+ at right tackle where he allowed one pressure. And that was in a full half of football. That's a hell of a half of football at right tackle for anybody. He went 2 for 2 on his pulls. I have a mild concern about the conditions probably helping his game at right tackle. But hey, it was a good choice to go to it, at least for this game, and getting through this one, because Fluker really looked like he was holding on every play, even though they only got called once.
Yeah, well, kudos to McCary for showing this early in his career that he can play center, right guard, and right tackle at NFL level pretty well. So, again, he's a player that gives them options moving forward. Right tackle, obviously, a very important position. If they need him to do that, he looks like he'll be able to handle that. And he's handled right guard before, and then obviously he was a starting center when Skura got hurt last year. So a promising young player, a guy who undrafted free agent, uh, has made the team last year, and has quickly become an important player. So yeah, they're fortunate to have McCary in this situation.
Certainly a good depth player, and at right tackle does not have ideal arm length. Now, he went through his career at California playing left tackle and being an effective pass blocker despite that arm length. At the NFL, I think there's many more players who'll take advantage of you. We've already seen that. The action verb shed shows up on my offensive scoring sheet a lot for him, unfortunately. He is who he is, but I thought he did a great job, and he and Powers really combined on a lot of blocks on the right side that were very effective on those edge rushers over there, as Jackson had pretty good time to throw throughout a lot of that fourth quarter.
Yeah, it's always good for the Ravens when you see Lamar with the clean pocket. We know he has the ability to shake some rushers if necessary. But yeah, Powers, interesting you mentioned him too. A guy who hasn't played a lot, since joining the Ravens, but the way things shake out, going forward, he could become another guy who this could be his opportunity, to play well. And I think definitely that's how these young guys should be approaching it. That this is an opportunity for playing time. Everybody on the outside is saying, "Oh, well, what are the Ravens going to do now? Can they win games with this offensive line? Is this the beginning of the end?" I mean, for a young player, this is a great opportunity to step in and really be part of a team that still has a legitimate shot to do some big things. So, Powers, this is his opportunity to step forward. And, Joe Delisandris, their offensive line coach, to me is excellent. Always pushing these guys to give them more. And I'm sure that he's going to make it clear to them that, look, this is your time to step up. Let's see what you've got. So it'll be interesting to see who they do go with on the offensive line Sunday, because you'll know for sure that that's the unit that looked the best during practice this week.
Right. I mean, I think we're getting to a point where Powers cannot be denied a starting opportunity this next week. And the reason I say that is Powers has gotten relatively little playing time, obviously, since he got here. He got a half a game split with Anger, I think it was, in the Pittsburgh game at the end of last year, played very well. He's played well in a few snaps, aside from one holding call that I kind of thought was bogus this year before this game. This game, he had 2 pressures allowed and a half of football at right guard, a B+ score. I don't know. He didn't miss any other blocks, by the way, which is really good. I don't know how you deny him a spot with the offensive line otherwise in shambles. So it may be McCary starts at right tackle, and it may be Powers starts at right guard. It may be they drop Skura, move Bozeman, and put him in at left guard. But I think we're at a point where Powers really has to get a start somewhere along the offensive line in this next game. Right guard probably makes the most sense. He's got the good arm length to open the front door on that right-handed power run game that they've used a little bit less these last few weeks.
Yeah, you could be right, but to me, the Ravens, they can always surprise you. Phillips was not supposed to be, or I can't say he wasn't supposed to be. He wasn't the favorite to be the starting right guard when training camp opened. Even early in the season, when Ronnie Stanley was hurt. You didn't know if they were going to make the switch to Orlando going to left tackle or go with someone else at left tackle. So now that Orlando's made that switch, to me, the right tackle position is going to be interesting to see who's there, and at right guard too. Powers certainly is a favorite to step in and get an opportunity to play, but again, I think the Ravens, unlike more so than maybe even some teams, feel like it's the five guys working together. Who's the five best? Because they require their offensive linemen to do a lot in a Greg Roman offense, and they're going to want to see some of the plays that they prefer to run. Which guys can move into positions and make the blocks that they want to go with. So I'm fascinated to see what's going to come out this week, because again, I don't think you can just lock anything and say take that to the bank as far as who's going to be there.
I would never do that, by the way.
Right. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. So I mentioning the combination, though, the combination of Powers and McCary on that right side is one of the reasons why I think a Powers McCary is more likely than a McCary Fluker right side this next week. We may see it otherwise. McCary obviously has arm length limitation. Powers has played well. Both of them played well together. So I guess I would not be shocked by anything, but I will be mildly surprised if Powers is not in that. Let's move on. We don't want to beat this to death. Fluker cratered really in this game. In one half, he gave up 1.5 pressures, a third of a sack, 15 yards in penalties. His hands were way outside the frame of whoever he's blocking. It's almost looked like he was hugging him at times. Oftentimes, he would even maintain that hug when he was behind the block, meaning the other player was on his way to the quarterback and he's still maintaining that. That's a good way to pick up penalties. The Patriots were screaming about it for most of the first for most of the first quarter anyway, before he finally got called for a hold in the second quarter and then pulled. Tough game for him. I still think his best position might be guard. Very grateful for what he did in right tackle for 2 games here. And I think the Ravens are frankly lucky to get out of the first half without the game given away. The way things went with the combination of play at center and right tackle.
Yeah, I mean, tough game for DJ, no question. You know, you have to wonder, what's going to happen now moving forward. John Harbaugh definitely made a point to say this is not the end. Saying that it's definitely not going to see any more of him, but it was obvious that he was having some issues, and they made the change. uh, they knew what was going on too, and felt that was what they needed to do to make a change with him not being in the lineup to have a chance to win that game. So, Fluker was brought here for his experience. When you're put in that position, they're counting on you, obviously, to bring some stability to the situation. Um, we'll see what happens going forward. But yeah, that was definitely a step back for him. And yes, for these young players now, if you want an opportunity to play, here it is.
Yeah, one of the reasons I guess that the Ravens didn't go with Fluker at right guard wasn't just that they liked him at tackle. It's that they had a much bigger upside with a first-year player, a second-year player, and a second-year player to have one of those 3 work out. And they've given all 3 of them a chance now with between Phillips, McCary, and now Powers at right guard. If one of those works out, you get 3 more years out of that player, including this one, or maybe you get 4 if it's Phillips. But if Fluker is here, he's only signed through the end of this year. So they had a much bigger upside benefit to having one of those young players win the job, and they certainly have given every opportunity for that to occur.
Right. I mean, they do have a lot, as you mentioned. There's a lot of young talent there with this unit, and most you do want to give young players time to develop, not throw them out there to the wolves if they're not ready. But obviously, Phillips showed enough in a season where there was no rookie camps and mini camps. I mean, that's very impressive for a guy like Phillips to come in and win a starting job in a year like this. And yeah, obviously Bozeman, another young player who they're very high on, and we've already talked about McCary. Those are 3 guys who definitely look like they have, a future here in Baltimore. And then now Powers may have an opportunity to show the same thing. So that's the idea, to keep building, young players that you can grow with. And again, they have a lot of flexibility. They just have to find a combination that A can work and B can stay healthy.
There you go. All right, let's move on. Talk a little bit about Lamar Jackson in this game. Lamar's taken some heat, obviously, nationally for the game he had. I thought he played really well, perhaps even exceptionally well for the circumstances with the rain. We saw drops involved. I thought he moved around the pocket fairly well. Didn't maybe take every run opportunity I wanted, but I generally very positive about the game he had.
Yeah, I was too. Certainly, there was another game. He's heard his whole career about not being able to come back when the Ravens were down. And he almost did it 2 weeks in a row. So, yeah, Lamar. I mean, I think the biggest frustration he has and the whole offensive has right now is that they can't seem to get any splash plays. That if every drive has to be, not dink and dunk, but methodical. Can't seem to create a situation where they can go over the top of a defense and, get a big play. Now, against the Patriots, they have a really good secondary, and that can be extremely hard to do. I know the Jets had some big plays against them in their previous game, but that's not usually the norm. But this has been a theme for the Ravens all year that, they talked about wanting to have big plays in the passing game heading into the season, and it just hasn't materialized. So, as far as Lamar's concerned, though, I think he's playing, pretty well, and definitely, to me, he's trending upward this season. He's not, putting up the spectacular numbers he did last year, but I feel good about Lamar going down the stretch that, he's going to play well, and the Ravens obviously will need him to play well to do what they want to do.
Yeah, to your point about the big plays, the pass, they had a pass to Edwards which went for 31 yards, but that was a shorter pass that was almost all after the catch. Or otherwise, their longest play was for 21 to Snead. That had some after the catch to it too. So they didn't really have any long passes in this game. Nothing that was 20 plus yards in the air. That was a positive throw there. So I agree completely on that. Now against New England, they really got, when they did try their deep shots, they tried one down the left sideline at the end of the first half that fell incomplete, and frankly was fortunate to be incomplete because the defensive back had position. And then they threw at one at the very end of the first half that was intercepted by J.C. Jackson.
Right. Maybe Lamar's worst throw tonight, or certainly the worst outcome, because you don't want to give away 3 points in that situation for sure. But I do feel that collectively the offense is a little frustrated that they can't get to those plays, and we'll see what happens. I should mention we haven't talked about Willie Snead. I think he's a guy who the last 3 or 4 weeks has played really well. I mean, a lot of stuff he does is unsung. His blocking. He's very, very rarely sometimes the number one option on some of these routes, but he's really stepped up in a big way, I think, the last 3 weeks, and he could be a guy going down these last 7 games that becomes a key factor. The Ravens always, any team needs somebody on third downs who can move the chains. We know Mark Andrews can do that, but Willie Snead, with all his experience, his toughness, able to line up in certain positions, and, sure-handed guy, I think he could be a guy who can help them, particularly in a season where they're not getting a lot of big plays, stay on the field on third down, get some first downs, and do some of the things he's been doing over the last couple of weeks.
We've mentioned a little bit on the show about Snead's, the great year he's having, but yards per target, probably the most important statistic for a receiver. And Snead now has 356 yards on 33 targets, which is 10 2/3 per. There's only been one receiver in the history of the Baltimore Ravens who's ever been in that neighborhood, and that's Mark Andrews with 11.04 in his rookie year. So, Todd Heap never did it. Torrey Smith never did it. None of those guys. So if Willie Snead can finish with this kind of a record, which is doubtful, they'll probably throw to him more, and he'll have some shorter receptions. But he's already made an enormous contribution to this season. So absolutely love what he's done. Let's talk scheme, Cliff. What in this game did you see that maybe was new to you, or you didn't like, or was some place where they didn't take advantage of the Patriots, or just anything you'd really like to discuss about scheme from this one?
Well, more than scheme, I just feel like Gus Edwards is a guy who I never come out of a game saying like, well, they gave it to Gus too much. You know what I mean? Like he talk about a guy who runs north and south, but he's not a flashy runner, but he's not a mechanical runner. He has really good vision, and even though he's not a shake and bake guy, if he has to move over a hole or two to find the opening, to get through the hole, he'll do that. Um, what no matter the weather, whether it's fast track or wet track, he's running with authority, and he's awfully fresh. I just like seeing Gus with opportunities to get in rhythm. And, Mark Ingram coming back is certainly a plus. They've got such a deep running back room. That's been a theme all year. Who's going to get the most touches? How they're going to work it out? Blase, blase. But yeah, I mean, again, I just feel like Gus again is having another solid year. I think he's a better back now than he was when the Ravens first got him. And this, as the season goes along, when defenses get a little more tired and tackling to me becomes a little more shaky, just like he's done in the past here, I think Gus Edwards could be a guy who late in the season could come up huge for the Ravens if he gets opportunities.
Yeah, it's amazing, but Gus is basically on pace for the same year he had his first 2 years in the NFL. A little bit lower yards per carry, but basically the same yards. And I agree. I think he's been a huge benefit to the Ravens. You know what I love about his running style is conservation of momentum. The guy, he makes a cut so he doesn't have to give up too much speed to do it. And so you see him he almost moves what I would call snakily when he makes his move. And he's not just a one-cut guy. He's really a guy who can make one cut, then get back to north very quickly. And I'm impressed by that running style, and that's why I think he gets more yards in level 2 than people really realize. Is he's able to quickly readjust to be going in the right direction, the north and south direction.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. When you give him the ball, you pretty much he's going to get everything you could get out of that run. Usually, he just doesn't waste. He doesn't waste motion. Doesn't waste steps. You're right.
It's a little bit difficult for me to throw a lot on this game played under such sloppy conditions and, micro inspect things that didn't work. But this was a very unimpressive line that the Patriots fielded against the Ravens in this game. Carl Davis played a big role in this game for them, an old Raven hand, of course. And Lawrence Guy is probably their top defensive lineman. They have Dietrich Wise. He's pretty good, too, on the inside. But anyway, They don't field a all-star crew, and they had the same problems the Ravens did of not really having a nose tackle who could stand his ground in this game. Obviously a problem for Ellis, but a problem for them as well. And the Patriots just did a much better job at taking advantage of that. They do have an excellent offensive line, but it was a shame that with Boyle and Ricard to go with the offensive line the Ravens do have, they were not able to take more advantage in terms of what they could do in the run game.
Yeah, and because the Patriots were running the football and chewing up clock, I mean, that hurt the Ravens too, that they were never able to take control of the game, from that standpoint and kind of dictate tempo and really make that line pay for having to stay out on the field for a long time. I mean, yeah, the Ravens last year, they would go through games without any 3 and outs. It was just, now it's me bringing up last year, which I hate to do, but so I'll take that. I'll take that hit. But yeah, I mean, if you want to make a defense that, as you said, that's certainly not one of the top fronts in the league. If you want to make them pay, you've got to stay out there and put drives together. And the Ravens still want to be more consistent offensively. They definitely show you drives, that 94-yard drive they had against the Patriots. When they put that drive together, you're thinking, all right, coming off what they did in the second half against the Colts, and then putting a drive like that together that early in the game, you're thinking, okay, they've got it figured out now. But it just doesn't seem like they can sustain that, for most games. It's hit or miss, and that's something they want to correct moving forward.
I've got to tie together a couple points you made here. You talked about them not getting the splash plays, and then we're liking the long drives. 2019 and this year when they've been successful against the Colts, and then in this game against the Patriots, long drives of short plays are better than a lot of huge chunk plays to get down the field a lot of the time. And the reason I say that is they eat up more clock is not important. They eat up more defensive snaps, and that's what really grinds down an opposing defense. It's not really the clock as much. And that's what I loved so much about watching the 2019 team play is, they could do whatever they wanted with the football for as long as they want, go for it on fourth down. And it was driven by a series success rate that was not only at the top of the NFL overall, meaning every 3 downs they got, they had the highest probability of getting a first down, but also when they ran the ball on first down, and this is extremely rare, they still had the highest series success rate in the NFL because they were basically unchanged between run or pass on first down. That's unheard of. It breaks all the rules of modern football in terms of series success rate. Almost anybody will tell you, any analyst out there, you pass on first down, you're more likely to get a first down on that set of downs.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, they did almost whatever they wanted, which, when it's 2nd and 4, 2nd and 3, you can basically do almost anything you want. And, this year, there's definitely been a concerted effort among opponents to, I think, try and take Lamar out of the running attack, particularly inside runs. If it's force him outside, make sure that he doesn't get into the teeth of your defense running the football. And so Lamar, obviously, to me, is still the best running quarterback in football, but teams definitely are making it a point to try and take away his big runs, the runs that really hurt you. Then with the offensive line not being as dominant as it was last year, that's made it harder for the backs to find the same success that they had last year. So, yeah, I mean, the Ravens still, they have the best rushing attack in the NFL still, but it doesn't seem like it to me this year. It doesn't feel like it. You're not coming away from games like, man, the Ravens just really, pounded that. They just ran however they want to. The Patriots, what they did to the Ravens in the first half, Monday or Sunday night, that's what the Ravens were doing to teams week after week. So that's really big for the Ravens. As much as I've been talking about hitting big plays, that is not to say that the bread and butter for them moving down the stretch should still not be finding a way to run the football consistently so that they can stay out of these 2nd and long and 3rd and long situations.
Yep, there you go. Let's talk about Marquise Brown for a second. He's now, in the last 3 games, has only caught 6 of 13 balls for 55 yards. That's 4.2 yards per target. And you know how I feel about yards per target from the discussion earlier. Better weather and field conditions can certainly help. He only caught 2 out of 6 in this game. A couple of things I was upset about. A player like that really can't get squeezed to the sideline by a defensive back there. And J.C. Jackson is fast, but Marquise Brown is faster, and he should be beating him down that sideline. And if the ball shouldn't be thrown unless he's even and leaving, right? So it bothers me that a player like that is getting squeezed to the sideline by any defensive back, frankly.
Well, Marquise, tremendously talented player, still a young player. That to me should not be overlooked. And teams are paying tremendous attention to him to try and contain him because he's such a big play threat. So that's a challenge that all good players face. That you're not going to sneak up on anybody. Everybody knows how fast this guy is. Everybody knows the chemistry he has with Lamar, and that the Ravens want to get the ball in his hands more than they have. So, yeah, he's going to have to find ways to, free himself, whether it's getting off the line of scrimmage or once he gets vertical, he has to make sure that he's in position to catch some of these deep balls. Lamar is going to have to be on target when he throws to Marquise, particularly deep, because even with his speed, these plays where he's just leaving guys and catching people off guard, I just don't feel that there's going to be a lot of that. That some of these balls, if he's going to make big plays, are going to have to be really good throws with not a lot of room to work with. And we saw Lamar drop some great dimes to him in the past. That's what it may be what it takes to get him going. And they may have to just, to me, throw it to him a little more short, and let him use his running ability after the catch. But if Marquise is not a bigger part of the offense than he has been recently, then yeah, I do think it is going to be, harder for the Ravens to move the ball the way they want to. So he is a key player moving forward. He's certainly capable of making big plays. I think it's something the Ravens are going to continue to try and get him the football, and for their sake, hopefully they'll start doing a better job, and he'll start doing a better job of making that happen.
Yeah. This is a very deep topic. We could obviously talk a lot more about it, but what he did early in the season last year, I think there are other elements in play where he can protect himself from having the sideline used as a defender more than he is this year. And obviously, I also would like him to make better plays as a defender himself, as happened on the interception. As didn't really happen on J.C. Jackson's interception. I felt it wouldn't have been an easy play. He would have almost had to tackle him, basically, to keep that interception from happening. But it seemed like he should have done something, being right there.
Yeah, I mean, again, as you said, the last thing you want is a turnover. If you got to turn into a defensive back, and wide receivers have so much liberty, it seems like officials have never really wanted to call, offensive pass interference as much as they sometimes should. So, yeah, I mean, again, second year, um, the cliche or what you look for always is for second year players to make the jump. It's not easy. It's easier said than done. Um, there were a lot of expectations for Marquise this year. I don't think he's a guy who worries about his numbers, but he definitely wants to be a part of, helping this team win. And I think yeah, it's been a frustrating year for him at times, just like it has been for Lamar and the entire offense. He's just got to, he's a hard worker. I still have expectations that Marquise is going to make some big plays before this season is said and done.
Yeah, I go along with that. Another player we need to talk about, Devin Duvernay. Now, there's been a migration of snaps from Boykin to Duvernay the last few weeks. Duvernay now up to 55% of the snaps against the Patriots. Boykin down to 29. I still absolutely love Miles Boykin, both as a blocker and what he brings to the table as a receiver, even though those tools have not all turned into great receiving results. But you got to love what Duvernay's doing with this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way Duvernay runs after he catches a football or when he gets a football in his hands. He runs with authority. He's looking to make something happen. He's not playing with any timidness. From really the first game to me, it looked like he was comfortable being in the NFL. And I think that yes, his playing time going up is deserving. I think that he's a guy that yes, you have to get him out there and give him a chance to make things happen. So yes, the Ravens to get him, to add him to this to running back room, I think it was an excellent pickup to get him in this draft. I remember, John Harbaugh being so excited when they got him because he was excited watching this guy on tape. It's clear to see why he was, and I think Duvernay could be another guy down the stretch here who becomes more of a factor than he has been.
Yeah, very, very exciting player. 9.7 yards per target for Duvernay. And once again, only about 4 or 5 Ravens in history, only 4 Ravens in history actually have been at 10 yards per target. So that gives you an idea of just what kind of rarefied air that is. So outstanding year he's having, and everybody kind of I think wants to see him be a bigger part of the offense down the stretch. Any other skill position players you want to talk about? I think we've hit on all the linemen. We talked about Lamar. We talked about some of the others. How about Mark Andrews and what's happening to him right now?
Yeah, well, this is Nick Boyle being lost for the season. Is he's one of the players who's going to be most affected. It could lead to more snaps for Andrews. Certainly, they're going to need him to be part of offense as far as making plays himself, and we all know how much teams opponents try and take him away. So, Mark Andrews, to me, I've loved him from day one. He's just a guy, he's a complete football player. He certainly has a knack for getting open, and he has great chemistry with Lamar. But, this time, a year ago, he was playing with, Hayden Hurst and Nick Bull at that position. Now, both of them are gone. So, Mark knows what's in front of him. I think he's going to be getting a good night's sleep from here on out because he knows on Sundays. I think that it's not like he's going to be out there for every snap, but he's a guy that they're going to need him to be the Pro Bowl type caliber tight end that he is. So, keep your fingers crossed, obviously, that he can stay healthy. You always want all players to stay healthy, but yeah, the Ravens really need Mark Andrews at that position to make things happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're making a very good point, I think, because now that he is going to be forced into playing something close to 100% of the snaps as the only real receiving tight end the Ravens have left, I think it's only reasonable to expect an efficiency loss. He played 41% of the snaps last year, was very efficient. He was similar to that in 2018 when he had his really great rookie year. But the more snaps he plays, the less efficient he has tended to be. So I think, this year he's down under 7 yards a target, which is not good for a tight end. It's not good, period. But it's definitely not what we need out of our Pro Bowl tight end at 7 yards a target. So I'm hopeful that he can take his game forward down the stretch. Looks like he has made a lot of progress as a blocker, and that's been great to see. This is something I want to ask you, and maybe you could ask a player this too next time you see him and you're allowed to be kind of in the same space, Cliff. But if you're an offensive lineman, do you keep, or a tight end in this case, do you keep a show your grandchildren reel of film, or in this case, obviously a DVD right now, that you want to put your very best plays on? So literally your family members 25 years from now, you could show them that and say, yeah, here's who I was. And even their own kids, they'll never really get them to see them play live. They'll be, too young still by the end of their careers in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Andrews, that block he had in
Yeah.
Indianapolis, that's something you want to show your kids or your grandkids. Hey, I was a stud, man. Look what I did to this guy. And yeah, football, it's interesting. The lifespan or the career span is just not as long, unfortunately, as so many other sports. I mean, sure, if you're a quarterback and maybe an offensive lineman, you can look forward to maybe having a longer career than other positions. But yeah, I mean, I covered golf for a while at one point in my career, and it was really cool. A lot of their kids got to see their dads when they were still, winning tournaments. You see Tiger Woods now, his kids can actually see him, not as he was, but certainly as a guy who can still win. For football players, yeah, Marshall Yonder, his last game last year, having his whole family taking pictures and whatnot, it goes so quickly. The years go by and then your career is over. So, the Ravens, they have a young team still. Their core players, very young, in their prime. Some of them haven't even gotten to their prime yet. This is going to be a learning experience these last 7 games. The Ravens really didn't face a lot of in-season adversity last year. This year, they are. And in the long run, I think that's going to be good for a lot of these young players. In the short run, though, they're going to have to figure out quickly how to adjust if they're going to do what they want to do this season.
As in your role in the Ravens media area, would you consider it presumptuous of yourself to advise a young player that, hey, the sands are going to run through the hourglass quickly and nothing's going to change about your career length by the advice I'm giving, but I'm just going to say, keep records of what's going on so you can show your kids, because it's going to be gone before they get to be an age where they can even appreciate it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think for the most part, I find it presumptuous to say things to players like that unless, they ask you, or unless the conversation leads that way. There are times where you're talking to somebody and, these guys now are a different generation than I am. I covered sports and was covering pro sports when I was in my late 20s and early 30s, where players were the same age as me. Sometimes I was actually younger than guys I was interviewing. That doesn't happen anymore. So, yeah, I sometimes a player will say something to you where you feel like, it's not just because, you're trying to have some type of influence on him. You just feel as a person that you're talking to, just like if you saw somebody going the wrong way down the street, you say, "Yo, man, you might want to think about going the other direction." Yeah, I mean, they're young, but yeah, the Ravens. That's another thing they do have. This is a really close knit team. It's not just hype. The way they talk about each other and how they, are close on and off the field and care about each other and play well together. That's going to help them these 7 games. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to win games, but it definitely helps when everybody is in it together and you're trying to help each other being successful. So again, I just think, as Willie Snead said after Sunday's game, this is going to show kind of what we're made of, and they feel they're made of a lot. So we're going to see.
Optimistic like you, and really nice to have your perspective on the show, Cliff. Josh, what do we have in the mailbag today?
All right, and Ken, you keep talking about this highlight reel and highlight DVDs. The kids today have this thing called YouTube,
Okay.
where they can just type in their dad's name and get all the highlights.
Well, that's nice.
So,
I wonder if they can get each specific offensive lineman block where he made a 2 and
No, but I guarantee they can search them and find what they care about. Imagine if your dad sat down and said, "Here, let me show you my highlights from work today."
You gotta wait for them to ask the question.
interested.
You gotta wait for them to ask the question. You say, "Oh, I just happen to have a DVD here." All right, let's hit the mailbag.
Yeah, and they'll say, "What's a DVD?" So, all right, we got a little bit in the mailbag, and the theme for this mailbag is play calling, because people have a lot of questions about why John called what on Sunday. So you can get in your questions on Twitter using the hashtag FilmStudyMailbag. All right, first one up is, what is the rationale coaching reason for putting in Hill in for the series of 3 plays inside the 10-yard line instead of Edwards or Dobbins or Ingram, and then they ended up settling for a field goal and not being able to get in?
All right, I'll take a shot on this, and Cliff, I want to hear your opinion on this too. I did not really see a reason to have a 4th running back in the game. I think the reason they had Hill active was for special teams primarily and for coverage. So I don't think it was really about that as much. And the last game of the season last year, when it mattered to Pittsburgh, it really didn't matter to us. Hill was a hell of an impressive running back inside the 10-yard line and had a power run where he broke a couple tackles for a touchdown. I don't really have a problem with it. Hill makes the offense a little more dangerous in terms of where you can having to defend more of the field. Maybe that's somewhat useful down at that spot on the field, but I don't think there's an enormous difference between the backs the Ravens have, since they have a lot of talent in all 4.
Oh, I like all 4 backs, but I do feel that, trying to get 4 running backs involved could complicate things some. It doesn't always have to be the same guys every week. I think it's great to have the deep running back room that they have. But yeah, I mean, again, I love, some of the things Gus Edwards can do. I believe that Ingram now, his body being fresh, he's a guy that, I think could help them. And then, Dobbins, you love his explosiveness too. So even though Hill has a lot of talent, 4 running backs at times, trying to get all of them involved, I think could make things a little complicated. But so we'll see what they do moving forward.
All right. Speaking of Ingram, the direct snap to Ingram, what does it show the defense different that just Lamar back there doesn't show?
Well, it gives you a little bit different style of runner. Back there, I don't know what they did in terms of playing Lamar on that play. I know he was split wide left, but I didn't really watch what the defensive back did on that play. Ingram, they've been successful with that direct snap play before, so it's not like it hasn't worked, and it usually works for positive yardage, and they only needed 1 in that situation. So there actually are a lot of things I like about it. Probably less injury risk for Lamar is one of the positive things I'd point to as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny when these plays work. You don't get these questions. It's not like they're bad questions, but the reason why I think we're scrutinizing them more is because it didn't work. And obviously, as you mentioned, they've had success with that play, but you can't. That's the snap there. You just can't have that. And now you wonder moving forward. Okay, will they avoid more situations where you have to make that the long snap? Will it lead to them, getting away from some of these plays, particularly in key situations? That's something else to watch moving forward.
Yeah, I think, the analogy I'd make is, why did you bet red on that last spin at roulette? I mean, we lost. Why? Why? So it's just silliness. What else you got, Josh?
Oh, well, the silliness is going to continue. With the bad weather and the bad snaps, why did they stay in the shotgun position?
I mean, the Ravens' offense is not built to run from under center. They'd be cutting out 90% of their playbook to do so. They'd have to move back to traditional play actions. I think that's the best reason I can give. Anything to add to that?
No, and I think we talked about Lamar, but he deserves. I think we didn't talk about how well he threw the football in those conditions. To me, it looked like, even though Cam Newton is not the most pinpoint thrower in the world by any stretch, looked like he was having more problems throwing the football in those conditions than Lamar was. And I saw a quote, I think, about Newton saying it was like throwing a medicine ball. Lamar didn't seem to be having any issues with the wet football. And, as a rookie, that was an issue for him, not so much wet footballs, but turnovers in general. Since he his rookie year, he's really done a really good job as far as fumbles, taking care of the football.
All right. And here's my favorite one we'll close out the mailbag with. I know we will miss Boyle blocking, but watching the game live, I knew whether we're running left or running right, depending on where he was lined up. So without him, do you think that'll help us be less predictable?
Maybe, but the whole point of having a blocking tight end like that is you get an extra guy at the point of attack and trade off with an extra guy in the box. So even if it's a little bit less predictable, it doesn't mean it's more effective.
Right. Execution is always the key. I mean, Patriots look like at times, they could have said where they were running the football. If you can't get to the point after you're getting blocked, then it doesn't matter. The Titans, the team they played Sunday, their plays, I'm not going to say they're predictable, but you pretty much know Derrick Henry is going to touch the rock a lot. A lot of times you can tell which way they want to run, but can you be physical enough to stop them? Because if you can't, it doesn't even matter.
Going to be a real test.
All right. Yeah, if you're surprising them every time with what direction you're running, but you don't get past the line of scrimmage, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
All right, Cliff, we talked at the beginning of the show about Black in the NFL and that podcast going on. What's your Twitter handle and stuff that people can follow you with as well?
Thanks. My Twitter handle is Clifton G. Brown, Clifton, G as in George Brown, or at Clifton G. Brown. And Black in the NFL you can find on the Ravens website. If you go to BaltimoreRavens.com, click on audio, all of our podcasts will come up. We have The Lounge with my colleagues Ryan Mink and Garrett Downing. Then we have What Happened to That Guy with John Eisenberg, 2 other interesting podcasts. And then you can also find Black in NFL on the Ravens website as well. So as you mentioned, we put out the fourth episode today. It comes out every other week. Things I love about podcasts is, you don't have to listen to it at any certain time. You control when you listen to it, riding in the car, whatever. So, and you got to listen to it all at one time. But I'm really enjoying doing the podcast. We've had some interesting topics, getting some good feedback. So, yeah, please check it out. Not just my podcast, but the other 2. I think they're all interesting if you like football, and also, now with my podcast, talking to players and other people about things outside of football as well.
Yeah, just like Film Study, all these podcasts are available in your favorite podcast app that you use. So go subscribe and download all of them. Ken, FilmStudyBaltimore.com. Articles are up, and we've got a new Situation Room came out this morning, and more podcasts coming out this week.
More podcasts coming out this week. This one you'll be listening to, we hope, on Wednesday. On Thursday, we'll have the Know Your Foe episode up there and available. On Friday, we'll have By the Numbers with Dan Reese, so that'll be a lot of fun. And we got the offensive line article, which will up either late tomorrow on that. Late on Wednesday or early on Thursday, one of the 2.
All right, that sounds great. All right, guys. Well, we will talk next time.